Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again to the next episode in the series. We left off the last episode where, um, essentially we got this UI working as we would expect. Things connected here, any of the interactions that we do with any of the data on the two screens, either this main list screen or this detail view, are now in sync with one another. If you're just jumping into the series now, definitely go back a few episodes or maybe from the beginning and get caught up. But I also mentioned in the end of the last video that we were going to go ahead and kind of re-architect this a little bit, and it would be a great way to introduce another Android component that you've probably heard about called Fragments. So that's exactly what we're going to do. If we take a pretty high level approach to our architecture, right now we just have two screens and they are managed by two different files, two different activities, and when we navigate between them, we are leaving one activity, going to another one, and we're going back. We're actually destroying the other activity and returning to one that exists. But instead of that kind of a design, we're going to move into the world of fragments, and so we can actually condense all of this into one activity that we'll leave as our main activity, and then we'll have that basically host the two different fragments that are going to be this main list screen and then this detail screen as well. So there's going to be a couple similarities, a couple differences between the activities and fragments, but fragments are basically like a lightweight version of an activity. They have a whole bunch of uses, and with some more advanced topics that we'll eventually get into, they're kind of the way that Google's pushing a lot of our development, moving to basically what they call the single activity architecture. And they just have a variety of benefits once we get into more lifecycle based things as well. So that's what we're going to do today. And so in order to do that, we're actually going to do a little bit of Googling. Let's go with adding fragments to activity Android. It's been quite a while since I've done something this way. So this is not what I'm looking for. Yeah, this is the article I'm looking for. So I kind of want to show you guys a little bit about just what to search for, how to Google things, or what articles you should or shouldn't be reading. The developer.android.com. When you go to basically any of the pages, they'll have this pretty similar layout here. There's so much information that goes along or that's bundled into this little like haven of documents. But if you find yourself on one of these pages, know that it's basically, Google's actual guidelines and development, I guess, tricks or tactics or explanation of certain things. So, you're usually going to be in good hands here if you end up reading through these kinds of articles and stuff. And they'll give you little code snippets here and there and explain a whole bunch of different things that you want to do, or, a whole bunch of things that you're trying to look for, and then, some primitive code and describing what you would need to do. So it doesn't have full-on implementation code. That'll kind of be maybe a little bit more around Stack Overflow or maybe some particular code lab, but these types of articles will definitely give you a solid and comprehensive overview of what you need to do. But if we take a look here, we're going to actually do things programmatically, but you see here that we're going to need a new layout element, UI element called the fragment container view, and basically that's going to be the entire layout for our activity file. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right now. We will go into our main activity, and eventually we will get rid of this recycler view, but we're just going to paste this in here, and we have an issue here. So we're actually running into something that I kind of wanted to explain. We are trying to reference a view that exists in a library that that this project does not know anything about. And if we actually scroll up to a little bit higher in the article here, it actually shows us where we would need to modify some of our build.gradle files and what information that we actually need to supply our project with, so that the project knows what we're trying to do. So we're doing Kotlin here, so I'm going to go ahead and just copy this implementation line. Again, double click on Shift, type the word build. We're looking for the build.gradle file here, and we're looking for the one that's in the app module, not the period, which is at like the project root level. In here you have some high-level configuration, and I'm not going to break all this down right now, but basically a lot of configuration about your application, about the specific version that you're at, the version name, different ways that you can configure, your release type versus your debug type. And then in here where it says dependencies, this is where you'll have some libraries that are, at your disposal that your project knows about. So we're going to go ahead and just paste this one in, and we also need to have this one here. So now if we click sync, we're now importing this library, the AndroidX fragment, and the KTX is the Kotlin version, at this particular library version. We'll get into like versioning and all that stuff later, but you can see that there's already some that kind of come with our project because of the version of Android Studio that we're running, and so certain things are already included. And now if we actually go back in here on this line, this is looking okay. Things are fine. We don't have any issues from the IDE. So this fragment container view is now essentially the layout is going to look exactly like this, where it's just going to take up the entire screen, and this is at the activity level. So then in our activity code, we will be programmatically adding in a fragment that will be this list view, and then when they click learn more, we will do what they call a transaction to actually add this new fragment on top of the other one that exists in this container view, and then modify the toolbar and those kinds of things. And then when you go back, we'll kind of just provide the back navigation. So creating a fragment is pretty simple. It's just a different subclass that we're going to be extending, and then there's a little bit of code samples here and a whole lot of explanation going on about like what you would want to do, or explaining all this kind of code. So we are gonna go ahead in here. Let's call this one the list fragment. That's going to extend fragment, the AndroidX fragment app. Okay, and then we'll also create another one just because we're here. We'll call it detail fragment. Again, just extend fragment, and we're good to go. So now these two classes here, not only are they named fragments, but they actually are seen by the system as a fragment. And you could command click in if you actually wanted to and get into the base code and whatnot. But just know that now we can actually do something with these special files. So with that in mind, we're actually going to go ahead and create the layout files for them as well. So we'll call this fragment list. We're actually just going to cut all of that out. And then we will go in here and paste it. To all it there, exactly. So now we're back to our recycler view here, and then if we do fragment detail and we take a look at our activity soccer tile detail, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this entire thing, which I guess we could use that layout file or just rename that layout file, but we're okay with just being redundant here. So now we have our main activity. We have the layout for our main activity, which is just a naked fragment container view. We have our list and detail fragments that are right now just naked fragments. And then we have the list and detail fragment layout files and whatnot. I know in the last video we touched upon the activity lifecycle. So there actually is the fragment lifecycle as well. Nope, that was the old article. Yeah. So this article will actually describe a whole lot about it. And you can read up on it a lot more, but basically what I want to call your attention to are these life cycle callbacks, these fragment callbacks, this chart right here. As you can see, there are some similar functions here called the onCreate, the onCreate, the onStart, the onResume, the onPause, onStop, onDestroy, and then there are a few other ones that are kind of added in as well that are not so much or don't directly map to the activity lifecycle callbacks. So there's the onCreate view, then the onViewCreated. There should be like an onAttach here as well, and onDetach from the activity. So there's just even more lifecycle callbacks that you can get granular with when you're trying to do something in the creation process and then undo whatever you're doing or free up resources that you're using or null out certain things in the destruction process. But just know that they do follow a very similar pattern of that the activity lifecycle does, and they have the same relationship in the sense that when the fragment gets on pause, it will just go back to the on resume when that's returned, or if it gets destroyed, then the fragment's going to have to be recreated. So there's kind of the the teardown process relation to the creation process. That like logic, that idea of basically how far you go in this destruction process is going to be how far you'll have to go in this creation process as well. So they share that between fragments and activities, but fragments have just I guess a couple other interesting ones that you can hook into if need be. But know that things are pretty straightforward, and there is a slight difference that I'm going to call out, though, at least in the construction process, and that is through the onViewCreated and onCreate view. So, should really be the other way around because this needs to run first. Traditionally, or not traditionally, before in the activity, we had this set content view function, and then we would pass in a layout that we wanted to inflate. Fragments differ from that. They do have the onCreate, but they don't actually have, that's not where you set their layouts. So here you can see that it's just, this function returns a view, and right now it's just calling super, which I believe you can actually, so you can put the layout here. This is the list one. You could put the layout file here in the constructor, and then you wouldn't have to override this function because it just calls super, which will, I believe, interact with this. Or if you didn't want to do that, you can actually inflate it here in code. And sometimes it's actually, I guess, better or helpful to do that. So it passes the layout inflator, the view group, and a bundle. So we will be using the first two here. This is going to inflate our layout file, list, container, attached to root false. And so either doing this in code here is telling the system at this time when we're creating the view, okay, this is what we're doing. Or, if you really want to do it in the, which it looks like actually that's what they suggest in a way, even for the activity, which is quite interesting because you see here they're not even calling set content view. But yeah, in the example fragment, r.layout example fragment. So I guess they're kind of suggesting for you to put it in this in there. So you know what? It's been a while, but I'll go ahead and do that anyway. We'll do it their way. Sounds good. We're on this journey together. Like I said, it's been a while since I've done things this way. So yeah, we're going on this learning journey together. But at this point here on view created, this is a safe time that to access the layout that you have told the fragment to inflate. So this view here is going to actually be this view here where you can then operate on it. So we can just copy this guy, we'll put him in here, and then fragment detail here. So these two are going to inflate the correct layout files, and then in this on view created callback is when we can actually hook into them, start modifying them, start attaching some objects to the UI elements, start referencing the UI elements, etc. I believe if you at this point in on create, you can't access the view. If we go back to this here, it's the on create is kind of happening before any of this view based stuff happens, and then when on create view runs and on view created, you see that it's kind of in this initialized state, whereas on create there's like nothing, it's like kind of in limbo. So that's just the system like opening it up and not necessarily, you're not at a point where you're ready to operate on the view. That's why the on view created is kind of like, okay, at this point you're able to go ahead and operate on the view. You can do the same thing in on start and on resume, but it's just best practice to leave it in on view created, because that's basically the callback or the function that you're going to run when your view has been created, so at this point in time that you're ready to go. So hopefully this has given a little bit of an insight into some fragments. We've talked briefly about adding things into the Gradle file, which added the new dependency that we needed for this UI element. And then in the next video, we're going to go ahead and actually, I guess, modify the main activity, have it operate off of fragments being involved or instantiated and driving the UI that way, because right now there's nothing in this activity main or main activity file, and it actually won't even compile at the moment because we removed this recycling view from the layout. So there's a little bit of cleanup we have to do, but a lot of this we can take and pass on over to the fragments and go from there. So stay tuned. We will dive into that shortly.